Welcome to Exotic Gardening with me, Yorkshire Kris, and on this week's episode we're going to talk about my appearance on Gardener's World and have a bit of a reaction video to how it was made and what I thought about it as well. So for those that don't know, Gardener's World is a BBC programme that's been on for many years, 40 plus years, and it's the main gardening programme here in the UK, and you can see it around the world in various different ways. I think BritBox or something like that is one of the main streaming services abroad to see this programme on, and in the UK it's on iPlayer, and it's a programme watched by I think about 2-3 million people at the moment, so it's widely regarded as like the premium gardening programme on network television. And they often show the gardens of stately homes, and they also show the main gardener Monty Don in his garden doing his gardening, and also visits to other people's gardens as well. And in the latest episode, my garden was featured on the show. So the reason I got onto this program is basically via the National Garden Scheme. So they have a media person who sort of puts gardens forward to local newspapers. So that's what happened to me last year when my garden was featured in the Yorkshire Post, and then that got picked up by other media agencies that wanted to do interviews about tropical and exotic gardening. And also I got contacted by the BBC to see if they could come round to my garden and have a look and film it. So that is how it came about. The BBC had contacted me in previous years before, over 10 years ago in my previous garden to film, but it never worked out for whatever reason, mainly because of the filming schedules and when I was available to actually host the BBC, and it never sort of worked out. But this time everything aligned right, I was free, the garden was still looking good, and they were able to come. So this was actually filmed last September, so in mid to late September 2022. So it's been a full year since they actually came to film the garden. And when I say they came, I mean I think it was 3 or 4 people. So we had a researcher, we had the main director, sound engineer and camera person as well. So yeah, there was 4 people, and they were here all day. So it's sort of 8:12, 5 p.m. they were here filming. So they do lots of sort of recce shots around the garden, work out some sort of idea of what they want to tell, the story they want to tell for the garden. And then they do lots of shots of myself, and my family were included as well this time. And then they do lots and lots of shots of the garden, sort of slow-mo shots and tracking shots and zooming in on certain plants. And lots was filmed that wasn't shown in the finished product, because that's what you do. You film lots of different things and then you put together sort of the highlights that tell the story. So we're going to have a look now, and we're going to sort of I will talk you through what I've seen on the screen, and let's watch the program. So just so you know, I've got headphones on so I can hear this, but it's not interfering with the sound. So Monty, this is Monty Don. He's talking about compost, but then he's going to move on to actually looking at my garden.
Then just think about customizing the compost or seed mixes you use. Now, we're going to Wakefield to visit the garden that has been created according to the particular passions of its gardener.
That's an overview shot of the garden. I'm a proud Yorkshireman and I enjoy the Yorkshire countryside, but I like the contrast of having something unusual in my own back garden. So I wanted to sort of create a mixture of exotic and tropical. Like I said, this was filmed quite late in the day as well. The sun's quite low, so lots of the shots were done in half shade or part sun. My day job is actually, but I think the cameraman's done a really good job of capturing everything. And the art gallery shop, and this is my passion and my hobby. Yeah, I'm not a professional gardener. Yorkshire Kris, and I grow exotic plants, pushing the boundaries here in Yorkshire. So yeah, as I said there, it's pushing the boundaries. So I do like to grow lots of different plants. It's not just big jungle leaf plants, as you'll see. I like the arid plants, Mediterranean plants, lots of colour in the garden as well. So this video will show you, hopefully, all the different parts of the garden.
9 years ago, and it was basically a flat lawn, and we cleared everything pretty much straight away, so we had a blank canvas to work with.
So yeah, I also gave them some photographs of what the garden looked like originally.
And it was sort of a 5-year plan. I started with a big Jabea palm, and that was in quite a big pot. And
so yeah, the big Jabea, by far the biggest plant that I brought from my old garden and planted in the new garden 10 years ago now, 9 years ago when we were filming this. So this is Jabea chilensis, the Chilean wine palm, probably the hardiest feather palm that you can grow in the UK, and it gets to absolutely huge proportions. You can see at the moment it's in shade on this view, and that is because of the time of year. Basically, the sun's getting lower in the sky, so it's not sort of above us, so you don't get the sun all the way around on the palm tree. But I think it looks still really nice with a backdrop highlighted in the background of all the different plants, the colour behind it as well.
That was positioned right in the centre, and then I built my paths around that area and measured it out so that I had nice sort of geometric shapes in this part of the garden. I'm not a trained garden designer.
So one thing you might notice straight away if you've been to my garden this year is the wooden paths have all gone now. So if you watch my previous videos from earlier in this year, I decided to take up most of the wooden decking paths. So in this video, I still had the decking paths last year, so I'm going to talk about them quite a lot in this video. But I dug them up, took them away, and then added gravel paths so that I could actually get round the plants that got bigger and bigger over the years. And these wooden paths were just too close to some of the big plants like the Jabea palm, so that's why they were removed.
In this garden, everything I've created myself. I've built all the paths and built all the structures in the garden.
So that archway only took 4 years to get completely covered in chocolate vines.
It's like a wall of foliage and flowers. We've got really tall cannas that are up to 3 metres tall. We've got the tall bamboos, and then a bit lower level we've got really colourful foliage plants like
that's Canna Alisteinii,
dahlias. And then we go through the winding wood chip path.
Yeah, so the wood chip paths wouldn't be without them. I think they're fantastic, low maintenance, suppress the weeds, and it's nice and comfy to walk on as well. And it's not too expensive, and you don't have to be sort of gifted in terms of woodwork skills or paving skills. You can just basically dump it down on the ground, cover the area, and make it, rake it out so it's nice and level, and that's it. And it just looks after itself.
And we move to an area where the jungle hut is. So this part of the garden is where I grow my tallest grasses, and it envelops the space. So I've got the large miscanthus.
So that's Miscanthus
grass, and I've got the
giganteus
as well to give that contrast. So when you're sitting in the jungle hut, you have a nice backdrop.
Notice there's no jungle drums music in this video. I thought there'd be some quite exotic cliche music, but they've chosen some quite mournful music in a way.
And then we move into
that football is not mine. That's an Aston Villa football.
The more Mediterranean style, more arid style plants.
So this area on the screen right now, this area has been redeveloped once more this year, where you can see all those beautiful red daisies. That is now a new gravel path. The agave Americana variegated there, that has actually been moved to somewhere else because the path had to go through in that area. Aeoniums came in for winter and they've been bedded out for summer in slightly different locations, but the arid theme does continue into this year.
So the second half of my garden, I wanted to increase the drainage so I can grow a wider range of tropical plants. So what I've done is used railway sleepers and decking to actually raise everything higher than the original ground level, so that I can incorporate more soil and grit to fill the raised beds so that I can grow these plants. Further on into the garden, it does envelop you again. So we've got the big bamboos and palm trees, and I've got my tree ferns in the corner as well.
Yeah, tree ferns, fantastic plants. You can see it on screen now. If you came to my open garden days this year, you probably didn't see the tree ferns because the bottom of the garden was sort of buried across because that's where I'm working on for next year when I'm changing the path. It wasn't quite ready to open this year, but it will be open next year when I change that part of the garden.
We've got children from 3 to 15 and they love it, and I think when you're small everything feels big.
They do love the garden, they like playing in the garden. They don't really help much in the garden apart from sowing the seeds in spring, but hopefully it'll inspire them at some point, even if they're not avid gardeners at this time. When they grow up, hopefully they'll enjoy gardening and their own gardens in the future.
And with everything being truly big in this garden, it must feel enormous, so it's like a full adventure, especially from a little girl, to actually go through the garden. It's like a day out just getting to the bottom of the garden.
The climbing frame, as you can see in the swings there at the bottom of the garden, I think I'm going to move them to somewhere else because hopefully this area, like I said, will be redeveloped completely over this winter into a very different style of garden down there. I'm going to clear out a lot of plants and continue my gravel paths throughout the bottom end of the garden.
It's really good because it's like not many other gardens are like it, and you can play hide and seek in it because it's got loads of good hiding spots.
Agaves, so in a second I point out which agaves I've got. It's great, hopefully, that you'll enjoy the fact that I've got so many different agaves on Gardener's World on primetime TV, because normally you just see agaves mentioned as agaves rather than actually saying what species they are.
This is Chimerops humilis,
or Camerops or Chamarops.
Vulcano, Agave americana, Agave montana, Briar armata. We've got a really rare one behind, that's Trachycarpus oreophyllus.
So that's Trachycarpus oreophyllus, as I just said. I think probably the first time it's ever been mentioned on national TV. So it's a rare plant. You very, very rarely see it in gardens, and hopefully next year it'll start flowering, and in the future we'll be able to get viable seeds with some pollination with other people's oreophyllus, and then we can actually get this plant back growing on the market for other people to enjoy as well. Fantastic palm tree.
I like to collect quite interesting and rare plants, so I do have all the different Trachycarpus species, and I like to collect all the sort of different gingers and cannas as well.
That canna was Canna forestii. The hardiest, sorry, that ginger, not canna, there's a canna on screen now, but that ginger was Hedychium forestii, which is the hardiest ginger and the easiest to grow in my opinion. Flowers really well as well and gets really tall.
In the garden, and I think Spanish flag is my favourite climber, and I grow that from seed every year. I plant it out.
Slow to get going this year, but it's in full bloom now in September.
Bamboos and other foliage plants, so it can grow up, and then it has these wonderful flowers that go from red to orange to yellow to white. Amaranthus is one of my also favourite sort of colourful annual.
So yeah, lots of amaranthus in the garden. This one here that you can see on the screen, that was actually sown 5 years ago. One packet of seeds from Chiltern Seeds. It's a giant type of amaranthus, and every year it's just sprouted. It's self-sown itself basically, and self-seeded should I say, and it just grows every single year without any help from me whatsoever.
I've just self-seeded around the garden, and I just leave them to get on with it really. I grow Amicia zygomeris from Mexico. It's a tender shrub, but I found it hardy enough to grow for the last 10-15 years. We have sort of indentations on each leaf, and then on the stems we have these sort of purpley green appendages.
So yeah, Amicia zygomeris, if you haven't seen this plant before or you haven't grown this before, I would advise you to seek it out. It's a fantastic plant for the garden. It looks so unusual and therefore, in my opinion, very exotic. It's well worth growing. As I say, it does come back from the ground every single year, gets to a really high height, well over 2 meters, and you will get some flowers, but it's a foliage that it's really well known for.
And they look very unusual. And
yeah, I had quite short hair. I had my hair cut, I think, just the day before this was filmed, And yes, looking back on it, it's rather short, isn't it, at the back and
It's the most
sides?
asked for plant in my garden. When people come round, they stop at that plant and say, "What's that?" I grow a chocolate vine mainly for the scent in spring, which just smell of chocolate.
Lots
and
of people
vanilla. I
ask
grow
me
them
about the
over a
chocolate
big
vines.
archway in the garden. If you've got two different
So yeah, you can see lots of the fruit. They've opened here on the screen, so they've split open these blue-purple fruits, and it does taste nice, but as you can see, lots and lots of seeds in there as well. You can't actually eat the pods if you cook them, but that's not something I've tried or really advised. It's really a nice sweet pulp that's well worth having a try. But like I said, the seeds get a bit annoying after a while because they're not really easy to eat.
types of chocolate vine. So I've got a cream and a purple type. They can cross-pollinate and you get the most unusual blue-purple sausage-like fruit. But it does taste like ice cream.
It really does.
Some plants are fine all year round in the ground, need absolutely no protection, whereas others do need a helping hand to get.
So yeah, pause it there. That's the winter. So it looks like in winter, lots of snow. Plants just have to deal with it. They're either weighed down by the snow, like the bamboo on the left-hand side, or they're covered by the snow in the ground, like the cannas, like the gingers, and then hopefully, most years, everything comes
through
back
winters.
fine.
So my agaves, I like to put a clear plastic sheet over the top just to stop the rain and the snow and ice getting into the crowns of them. My bananas, I've got the hardy Musa Baju, which I like to.
That's not a Musa Baju on screen, but I do have them in the garden, and Musa sycamensis. The one on the screen is the onset Heniba, which is fantastic banana. I've got a couple left because I did have that bit of a disaster last winter, which we talked about on an earlier video, but well worth growing for the huge upright paddle-like leaves.
Around the stems, and then my more rarer onset Heniba bananas, I do have to dig up and bring them frost-free into the greenhouse. The soil's really important, and I think spending time and effort and a bit of money to getting the soil right in the first place will pay dividends in the long run, because you can get the drainage right, you can get the nutrient levels really good, and that will make the plants grow bigger and healthier.
Totally. So I've talked about this before, but I would spend as much money on the ground, in the ground, than above ground. Getting the soil right is essential if you want plants to thrive, not just survive, but actually get bigger and better every year. You want the drainage to be right, like I said, and this is different for different plants. So the Gunnera doesn't really want much drainage, whereas obviously things like the cacti and the aloes and agaves want the best drainage possible. And then you've got all sorts of other plants that want nutrition. You want heavy sort of manure added into it. So like the cannas and bananas, they thrive on moisture retentive, humus rich soils. So you can change different areas by adding different types of soil and compost to those areas, and then plants will just basically benefit from that.
My family just let me get on with growing the garden and creating sort of a tropical paradise for them to be in the summer months. We'll never leave this garden now. I think this
nice
is
shot of the bin.
Forever house and forever garden, and we're hoping that the plants will get bigger and better as the years pass by.
Nearly stumbled over my words there. And back to Monty's garden. Let's see what he thinks of the of my garden. That's a big compost heap.
The garden looks fantastic, and the fact that it's in Yorkshire, which normally one thinks of as being inhospitable.
Inhospitable. I won't go quite as far as saying it's inhospitable, but yeah. What else do you have to say?
Shows that actually, where there's a will, there is a way, and it does look superb.
Thank you very much, Monty. I'm glad you enjoy the garden, and yeah, thanks to Gardeners World for coming to visit the garden. It was a great day. I mean, obviously I do lots of filming in my garden all the time for my YouTube channel, doing all the videos, but this was on a different level. You know, it was 4 people all day filming, directing, and taking the audio to the next level, basically, obviously on a much higher spec than what I do with my YouTube videos. It was a good learning opportunity for me as well. So really thoroughly enjoyed the day, and hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully enjoyed watching the Gardener's World and also this reaction video as well. So join me next week where I'll be doing more in the garden rather than watching gardening.